So, hello everyone, and welcome to our presentation about precision teaching. Now, let me just kind of set the scene for you for a second. Just a year ago, after me being kind of a research nerd, a one of those people that just wants to learn as much as I can about education and different methodologies, I came across precision teaching. Uh, very late, right? 14 years into my career, which was very odd because I soon found out that it had a long history. It's one of the most established methodologies in education, and so it was just kind of one of those moments where when I came across precision teaching, I just thought, how much more is there to know? And you don't know what you don't know, and kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect kind of sets in. I followed up with learning about precision teaching by going to a school called Morningside Academy in Seattle, which I was told by folks who knew about it are really the leading school in the world in this methodology and other things that really have piqued my interest. Things like Engelman's direct instruction and MTSS. So I visited Morningside Academy. I got to see their wonderful school. I met Daniel, and I was basically given full access to all the classrooms and able to see this really unique approach, which doesn't really look anything like you see in any public school. I got to see it in action with many different children in many different classrooms. Fast forward to now, and I'm here with Daniel Carroll, and he's going to be presenting to you all about this method from with pictures and videos from his classrooms and from his school. You can go ahead and click to the next one, Daniel.
Sweet.
Just real quick introduction to me. My name is Zach Groshell. I'm a former teacher in that I left in August, and now I'm doing consulting. So I work with schools to develop their models of instruction, typically around things like direct instruction and behavior, explicit instruction, right? Approaches that actually move the needle on achievement, not those other methods. You can find me at Progressively Incorrect is my podcast where we interview people. By the way, the head of school and the founder of Morningside Academy have an episode on here. Maybe many of you listen to that. And finally, I'm the director of Step Lab North America, which is an instructional coaching PD company, a platform for coaches. I just wanted to have Daniel click one more just to show you that if you are a coach or a principal and you are working with kind of trying to develop your coaching model, I do have 3 events that are on the screen that are coming to you in May, where folks like Peps McRae, researcher Sam Sims, instructional coaching guru Josh Goodrich, loads of people are going to be at these events for sort of a tour around coaching. So you just got to steplab.co, Google Step Lab, and you can get yourself signed up. I would love to see you if you're in these cities at these events. Without further ado, I want to introduce Daniel Carroll. He's going to talk to himself about himself in a second, but we sort of co-made this presentation, and my role is going to be kind of to dig into his thoughts and his questions as he leads the rest of this. Daniel, take it away.
Okay, so hi everybody. Just found out Chris Melrose is here somewhere watching. So Chris, if I get anything wrong, feel free to interrupt. But anyway, I'm a teacher at Morningside. I've been here for 3 years, or this is my 3rd year. I have a career background in behavior analysis. For the first 2 years at Morningside, I was progress monitoring specialist, so I got really familiar with the standard celeration chart and precision teaching. Right now, I'm a full-time teacher, which is awesome. And my hope is to kind of pursue an educational policy degree at University of Washington and kind of take these evidence-based practices like explicit instruction and also precision teaching to a larger scale. And if anybody has any questions or comments about that, please email me because I love to talk about it nonstop. And my email's right there. It's just daniel@morningsideacademy.org. Okay, so I'm kind of just going to hop right into it. I'm just going straight in. Before we get started talking about precision teaching, I want to go over kind of 3, 4, 5 terms that we should cover first. So the first one is the big one. It's fluency. And if you're in this talk, you've probably heard fluency before, maybe like oral reading fluency. That's something that people hear a lot. But fluency is kind of this idealistic state of a performance, and it's our ultimate goal to kind of get all of our student performances to this idealistic state. And a fluent performance is one that's natural, it's stable, and it's maintained over time. So, like, easy example is tying your shoes. If I was like, go tie your shoes, you'd be able to do it. If I was like, go tie your shoes outside, you'd be able to do it. It's fluent, it's easily accessible. And the best way to achieve fluency is through frequency building, which I'll kind of refer to frequency building as practice. When I say practice, I mean something very specific. I mean frequency building. So, what's frequency building? Well, frequency is behavior count per minute. So, basically, any observable behavior that a student could engage in, a count of that per minute is frequency. So, frequency building, it's just increasing the rate of correct responses in a given amount of time. So taking the skill and increasing the amount of times that they can do it correctly in a specified amount of time. So when I say practice, that's what I mean. Practicing correct responses, not just like go practice long division until you get better at it. And then precision teaching is the best way to monitor that frequency building or that practice. And just one quick clarification about behavior. When I say behavior, I mean any observable or countable behavior or performance that a student can engage in. So not just like bad behavior, or like we'll hear like, oh, that kid has a lot of behavior. It's like, yes, we all do. All right, so those are some terms that I wanted to cover first. Okay, so now, why fluency and why frequency building? So why do we care about fluency? So fluency is, like I said, this idealistic state of behavior. And if we kind of look at performance through our typical lens, which is accuracy, two performances of 100% accuracy can look very different. So if I give an assessment with 5 questions and 50 questions, two students get both of like 100% correct on both assessments. Those performances are totally different. But if all I have is accuracy, then like I can't see the differences. A better example of that could be if I give out a sheet of math problems to two different students, and one student completes the 5 math problems with 100% accuracy in like 5 minutes, and then the other student completes all 5 problems 100% accuracy but takes them like 30 minutes. Nobody in their right mind would say that those performances are the same, but if all I have is the product of 5 problems solved correctly, then I don't know that the performances look different. So accuracy alone is not sensitive enough. The student who took 30 minutes, that performance is going to look slow and painstaking, and they're probably going to have a lot of like counting on their fingers. It's not going to look the same as the one who can rip right through it in 5 minutes. Okay, fluent performances are more likely to occur in the future. So just like the shoe tying example, if you're fluent at tying your shoes and it's easily accessible, you're going to be more likely to do it in the future after you've left the classroom or the learning environment. And fluent performers can work through distractions. They can perform for extended periods of time in different settings. Classes at Morningside are a little bit chaotic, and that's kind of on purpose because a fluent performance should be able to occur in a chaotic environment. So frequency building, so that's why fluency. So why frequency building?
Can I ask a question about that too? Because
Yeah, absolutely.
so what you're saying is that what is important is not how it necessarily that that they're just accurate. Like accuracy is insufficient. There is another layer upon this which has a timed element, which is that if you can do it quickly, all of these things kind of start to be expressed. Like you're able to do really complex things with a lot of contextual interference. Things can you because you're fluid, just like you gave it the fluent, just like you gave with the tying the shoes example. You could do it outside, inside. You could switch shoes, and you're not going to have any trouble, right? What in education though, we're often told that it doesn't really matter how about the speed. In fact, all I care about is is accuracy. As long as they can get it right eventually. I mean, have you heard that before?
Definitely heard that before, and I think that that point of view is correct to an extent. So, in order to start engaging in frequency building, they have to get it correct. So, getting it correct, like before you start practice, the goal is just get it correct. It doesn't matter how long it takes. So let's put quality over, or let's keep quality as our constant, and it can take as long as we need. But once they are accurate, uh, the only way to get fluency, to get them kind of like with this fluent, flexible performance, is to engage in multiple practice opportunities within a confined period of time so that we can count it. So, yeah, getting them to go faster so it's more easily accessible. And so, kind of another point on that, some students are able to achieve fluency with limited practice opportunities. So, you could put a new skill in front of some group of learners and they could be like, all right, two examples, I got it, I'm ready to go on to something else. I could do this now and I could do it tomorrow, I could do it next week. Some students, and most of our students at Morningside, need a lot more practice opportunities than that to even get close to a fluent performance. So that's where the frequency comes in. And so frequency building, if learning is a change in student behavior, so like I have a student who's performing a certain way. I want to change that to perform a different way. That's learning. The only way we can actually objectively measure learning is if we can count the behaviors. So we have to be able to observe them, count them, and then we chart them on the standard celeration chart. But I'll talk about that later. Um, so yeah. Okay. Any more questions there?
Well, it's just
Okay.
like also I'm thinking like what you're talking about are essentially a, loads loads of practice. Like we could call even drills. I mean, this is sort of a bad word in education that the idea that kids should have a lot of drilling, but we do this in sports. We do this in sports where people shoot enough free throws, right? And they shoot free throws every single day for long periods of time because we want to maintain that behavior. We want to accelerate that behavior, but we don't apply it so much to teaching. So I'm very excited to see kind of the more of the methods, and I won't drone on anymore. So yeah, go ahead.
No, you're good. All right, so let's take a look at kind of this graphic right here. So this is data taken from Carl Binder, and basically what he did, it's a little bit of a complex chart, so we can kind of break it down. But along the top are different activities that he asked three groups of individuals to engage in. So the first one is like put a half-inch peg into a pegboard. So basically, he went up to a group of people and was like, "See this peg? Put it in this pegboard." And he did that with typical elementary students as one group, and the other group was like tier 2 to tier 3 students. So students who needed like a lot of support in the classroom, could be considered like mentally disabled. But and then the other group was grad school students. So each group was asked to engage in the same, I don't know how many there are, like 10, 12 behaviors. And then he measured them on percent correct. So out of however many times I asked you to put the peg in the peg hole, each group could do it 100% of the time. And they could do that for writing numbers, saying numbers, reading numbers. All performances look the same. Based on the way I described the three different groups, nobody would say that the performances were the same, or at least your best guess would probably be that they looked different. But you don't know that if your only measure is percent correct. So if you look at the same data as charted using movements per minute, I think is what he said. Yeah, movements per minute. So basically the frequency of the behavior, it starts to look a lot different and we can get a picture of how this performance looked. So take the first one, putting a half-inch peg into a pegboard. The tier 2 and tier 3 students, their performance looks about how you would imagine it. It was pretty infrequent, so probably painstaking and slow. Lots of fine motor skills weren't there. The higher group, they were going pretty fast, and that makes sense. Like, yeah, obviously, if I ask this group of grad school students to put a peg in a pegboard, they're going to be able to do it very easily. All of them did it 100% of the time, but without a fluency measure or a frequency measure, we can't get a good analysis of what the performance looks like. So we need that frequency measure in order to build performances to fluency. Okay. And on that note, I actually have a bit of an interactive activity. So hopefully everybody has a pen or a pencil and something to write on. I don't know how we want to do this, Zach, but maybe I don't know. Put a 1 in the chat if you have something you could write with and write on. We're going to do a little bit of a timing.
Love it.
Perfect.
I think we're good. They're teachers. I'm the only
Yeah, they
teacher who
can
doesn't
hang.
come with a writing thing, even at an airport. I have a problem, but these guys know what they're doing. So,
Okay. We're going to do a little bit of a timing, and I'm just going to have you, let's write your ABCs. Let's do lowercase to keep it consistent. And do it with your dominant hand. So let's do 30 seconds, just writing your A through Z's with your dominant hand. Okay. Normally I would make sure everybody was ready, but I'm just going to go ahead and start. So here we go. Get ready. Please begin. I'll do it too. All right, and go ahead and stop. Okay. Did anybody make it through the whole alphabet? I did. Just wanted to brag. Okay, so yes, perfect. All right, now what we're gonna do, same thing, 30-second timing, A through Z is, but I want you to switch hands. So if you wrote with your right hand, switch to your left hand. We're using our non-dominant hands. Okay, here we go. Please begin. I can't hear anybody talking, but this is usually the part where people start making frustrated noises. You can see the frustration on my face. All right, and stop. Okay, so I will show you mine. That top one is, oh, don't look at my notes. That top one is with my right hand. My handwriting's not the best, but it still looks better than this mess with my left hand. But, technically, you can tell that that's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So take a look at yours, your right hand and your left hand, or vice versa. The accuracy is probably about the same. I mean, your letters look okay, even with your non-dominant hand, but one of those performances definitely felt very different for you, unless you're ambidextrous, which that is very impressive. But probably the performance with your non-dominant hand was like slow, shaky, painstaking, not fluent. And that's kind of what we're trying to get at here is that we're aiming towards fluency, which is this idealistic state of an easily accessible, maintainable, stable performance. And these letters right here are absolutely not fluently written letters. They're accurate, but not fluent. Not fluent writing with my left hand. So, all right, let's keep going. I always like doing that activity. It's fun. Okay, so we've talked about why fluency, why frequency building. Now, why precision teaching? Uh, Sorry, I'm reading something in the chat. Okay, so why precision teaching? Well, my first point here, accelerated learning is needed. Students are falling behind. I mean, you don't have to work at Morningside to know that. But traditional teaching and traditional measurement methods aren't enough for the learners that we have. And I think anybody who's in the field teaching knows this. But kind of my moral statement here is that if superior teaching or if superior instructional methods exist, then there's this kind of moral imperative for us, teachers, administrators, and policymakers to implement them. So that's kind of what I'm staking my career on. But failure to do that would be to perpetuate or even exacerbate current inequities. So we have learners that aren't learning at the same rate that other learners are. If we keep methods the same, then things aren't going to improve. Um, Now, kind of why standard celeration chart? With precision teaching and using the standard celeration chart, interventions that teachers come up with for various students can easily be shared between classrooms, and there's no explanation of scales or metrics. So I'll show you some pictures of a chart in a second. I know it's like, what is this chart that we're talking about? But you'll see it. But anybody can take a look at a standard celeration chart and read it. And it's easily lends itself to a visual analysis. So like with only a brief instruction, like here's what this part says, here's what this part says, anybody could look at it and see if learning is happening. And then precision teaching kind of provides this non-linear analysis of instruction. Uh, I'm going to talk at length about that topic later, so I'm just going to save that bullet point. But basically, to sum it up, our ultimate goal is to build learning objectives to fluency. We use repeated practice with immediate feedback, which is frequency building, to achieve fluency. Precision teaching is our chosen tool for the analysis of frequency building because we think it's the best way to do it. We, as in Morningside and people like us. Okay, so that's kind of like, that's what we're doing here. All right, what is precision teaching? Well, here's a picture of a chart, finally. So precision teaching is a system for the analysis of student performance data. So we're talking about frequency building, which means that we're talking about specific, observable, and countable behavior, and that's what we chart on the chart. And the whole point of that is that PT allows teachers to determine the impact of their instruction on student performance. So I can literally see if what I'm doing is, having any kind of impact on my students' performance. And I'll break down exactly what each part of this chart is in just a moment. The reason that PT is so helpful is that most kind of assessments in schools, they kind of happen on a few different levels, but even the most frequent assessment in schools does not happen often enough. And sometimes the assessment is more of like a product of learning rather than actually looking at the performance data. But most assessments occur infrequently and they're not sensitive enough to notice small changes in behavior. In most models of assessment, the point of intervention comes too late. So by the time I know there's a problem, it's too late because I have to move on to the next thing. I want to know if there's a problem immediately. And with the chart, we can monitor student progress towards fluency, which is our ultimate goal. And just a real quick point, data on the chart are charted as a count per minute. So we're charting frequency on the chart. I
Now,
know it's like, what is this chart? But we'll talk about that. Go ahead.
yeah, I want to ask because the first thing one of the things that blew my mind when I visited Morningside was that this chart, which looks really complicated, how could we possibly teach a teacher how to use it? Oh my goodness, it's a it's a beast, right? But this chart, and you'll show a video of this in a second, I'm sure, was being managed by students themselves. Like the students were plotting their performance on this chart. So you're able to teach at an entire school level students, some of whom have minor disabilities or special needs, to use this chart.
Yeah, totally. That's always I had to learn how to use this chart at MSI, Morningside Summer Institute, which I have a slide for later. And I was like, this is so hard, this is so complicated. And then I went into my mentor teacher's classroom and the kids were using it. And I was like, what? They can do this and I can't do it. So I actually had a couple of students teach me how to use the chart. So anybody can pick it up pretty easily with practice. And I see a question in the chat, which is an excellent question. How are the contents/skills taught this way chosen? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But I'm getting giddy about that because that's one of my favorite parts. But so anyway, excellent question. Okay. So like Zach said, let's take a look at kind of how this looks in a classroom. So here's just a little short video of what a PT block looks like in a classroom. I can let it play one more time if we want to see. So this is like a passage reading fluency block, I think. So they're reading out of a book. The timers going off are from kids running their own timings. They're charting their own data, and the teacher in the room kind of just bounces around, like helping kids who need help, verifying. So if a student is like, I got a certain number of words, and the teacher's like, all right, I'm going to come over there and make sure you actually did get that certain number of words. So that's what it looks like. It's
The
not as, go ahead.
Yeah, the funny thing is like people in education discourse will say that like timing causes anxiety. It causes a lot of stress. And so I wanted to point out a few things, which was that the students are sitting elbow to elbow. They have a little kitchen timer, and they are so used to this, and they do so many timings. I mean, how many timings do you think a child would do on an average day at Morningside? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, definitely like easily 20 for,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And they're not stressed about it through a lot of exposure to this, but also the setup, the warmth of the school, right? The rationale has been explained. They're managing their own chart. They're trying to beat their own goal, and it's not like this weird competition that sometimes happens in schools where you guys got to do it and the teacher's like bearing down on the kids. It's a very like kind of a warm and a friendly environment, but 20 timings in a day is what I'm hearing, right?
I mean,
Sorry,
probably
yeah,
more than that.
yeah,
20 easily.
yeah,
Could be
yeah,
like
yeah.
40, but yeah, but it's a lot. Um, but yeah, okay. So now let's talk about the chart just a little bit. Okay, so standard acceleration chart. I've got some arrows on here, and I'm going to kind of go through what each big part of the chart means. Okay, so celeration. Why do we call it the standard celeration chart? Well, celeration is a made up word, and it's just the root word from the words acceleration and deceleration. So we've just taken the prefixes out. So what celeration is it's the rate of increase in the frequency of behavior. So some people will call it the rate of the rate. But basically, we're taking the increase in behavior, and the acceleration is the rate of increase. So on the y-axis, this is the most beautiful part of the chart, in my opinion. The y-axis is a logarithmic scale, and all that means is that it's able to represent learning as proportionate to previous learning. And when you think about, how we view learning, it kind of makes sense that learning is proportionate to previous learning. So like a clear example of that is this. This is one that Kent loves to give, but baby's first steps. So like when you have a baby, the baby starts taking, their first steps, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, first steps, so exciting. The gap from 0 to 1 is huge. The gap from 1 to 2 is huge. Everybody gets really excited. But by time, baby is walking their 99th or 100th step, nobody cares anymore. It's like, okay, cool. From 0 to 1, it was a big deal, but from 99 to 100 is whatever. Let's do something else now. So on the chart, the gap between 1 and 2 is a lot bigger than the gap between 99 and 100. And I know you can't see the numbers like in super fine detail on the side. That's okay. Just kind of get the gist that it's a logarithmic scale, and it's designed to show learning as proportionate to previous learning. So the more fluent you get with the skill, the less obvious small changes in your behavior will look. Okay, yeah, so then the x-axis, that's just a standard unit of time. So that's where the standard part of the standard acceleration comes from. So on this particular chart, each line on the x-axis is a day. So it maps perfectly onto a school year or half of a school year. So it's very convenient. Oh yeah. Okay, Andrew says complete 3 to 5 timings on a given skill. Depending on their needs, they may have 5 to 10 skills across subject matters. So yeah, that sounds about right. But anyway, so the chart maps perfectly onto a school year. So it's very easy. Those big thick lines with numbers above them are Sundays. So you get an easy picture of weeks. And we use celeration lines. I don't have any celeration lines on here, but I do have a deceleration line. But we use celeration lines to set daily goals for ourselves and for our students. So the importance of a daily goal is that each day for almost every topic that a student is working on, they know exactly what they're trying to achieve. So that knowable goal, like, okay, I know that yesterday I read 45 words in a minute. Today I need to read 50. That kind of takes away this, you know, abstract concept of getting better at reading. And it's like, well, I know that all I need to do today is read 5 more words correctly than I did yesterday. And we can see that those small increases on the chart get us closer and closer and closer to fluency, which is the ultimate goal. And celeration lines can either be a multiply line, so that's to increase behavior, or a divide line to decrease behavior. So my deceleration line right there was to lower that student's errors on word reading. So basically, I was like, you're reading words fast enough, but today I want you to make 4 errors because yesterday you made 5. All right, now we'll talk about more parts of the chart. So this particular chart, I think I already mentioned, is for word reading fluency. So those little tiny little dots on the chart are correct words read in a minute. The lower arrow is pointing to an X. It kind of just looks like a blob, but it's an X. And those would be incorrect words read in a minute. So this particular timing that these arrows are pointing to, it looks like the correct words is about 70 in a minute. And the X is like at 10. Yeah, 10. So 10 errors in a minute. So we would say that as 70 over 10. And like I said, 10 errors is a lot. So I drew a deceleration aim to set an error reduction goal for that particular student. And the little line at the bottom represents the timing floor. So basically how long the timing was. So all of these timings were 1 minute long. Okay. 1 minute is the typical timing length, but sometimes could be 2 minutes or 30 seconds, but could be anywhere from, you know, well, could be anything really. All right. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at the top, there's the date. So this maps perfectly onto a school year. So that arrow there is pointing to the 6th of October, 2024. And then, oh yeah, each of the vertical lines is a day of the week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then the thick lines are Sundays. Okay, so that's kind of the chart taken at a glance.
Here's a question, because a lot of people that may be on this call know about precision teaching in a one-to-one setting, and so
Mhm.
it says, don't these need to be one-to-one with an adult for this example of words correct and words incorrect?
Excellent question. So all the data that's on this specific chart is data that I personally witnessed happen. So I don't put anything on my chart that I didn't see. So how that works is during a fluency block, like you saw in that video, students are doing their own thing. I kind of bounce around to individual students. We have a method for, you know, them getting my attention. So if they make their goal, they write their name on the board. I go over, I watch it happen. I say, yep, you did make your goal, and I chart it on this chart. Or I say, you didn't make your goal, keep trying. Usually I'll still chart it anyway. And then if they end up making their goal later, I'll go back and just rechart. I have a fancy erasable pen, so I can chart in pen and then erase it. Because I don't like switching between pen and pencil. But anyway, but for the most part, students can run timings with each other, and that is the majority of the practice that they're getting. The majority of the practice isn't with a teacher, it's with students, and we've trained up the students to catch each other's errors and chart them on a different version of this chart, which I have a picture of a little bit later. But yeah, so it doesn't have to be one-on-one with a teacher. You can train students to do this with each other. And really, that's the only way you could do this with a classroom of uh, more than 8 kids, which most classrooms are. um, okay, but yeah, there we go. Sorry, I was seeing if there's any similar questions in the chat. I see 20 to 40 minutes a day on just timings. Yeah, kind of. Basically, like they'll do timings on different subjects, and the total amount of time could add up to that much time. Anyway, all right. So now let's talk about a PT action plan. So first, let's just say you've decided to start implementing precision teaching. How are you going to go about it? So first thing you need to do, define an end goal. Okay, how do you do that? So you got to start thinking about what it is that you actually want your students to do. So you need to be as specific as possible. So some examples of that would be, I want my students to solve long division problems correctly. That's something that I've definitely said a lot of times. Or I want my students to read words with the final E correctly every time. Those are two examples of end goals that I want. Some non-examples would be, I want my students to understand division. Don't we all? But that's not a very specific end goal. Or I want my students to get better at reading. So end goals can be taken from current learning objectives that you have already. You probably already know what they are, but it's the clearly defining, counting, and building frequency towards fluency that sets PT apart from other methods of analysis. Okay. And here are some specific published aims for different what are called pinpoints, but basically that's just the objectives. So like that first one there, there's a lot of words that we're not going to go into, but basically I think it says see object, count them in succession. So a frequency aim for that would be 110 to 90 per minute. We put the higher number first because we want people to aim for the higher number, as opposed to saying 90 to 110, because then people would be like, oh, 90, got it. And then that celeration aim, that's a tool that we use to set goals. So basically, I would say, okay, for this particular student, I'm going to say that if they can do this behavior 30 times on Monday this week, they should be able to do it 60 times on Monday next week. So it should double each week. That's what that times two means. But anyway, there's all kinds of published frequency aims for different behaviors. Alrighty, so now you've defined an end goal. You know what you want your student to do. You got to identify components of instruction and analyze current performance. This goes back to that question, how do you select skills to use with precision teaching? So this is how you do it. So I'm going to look at what I want my students to do. So I've got my end goal. Let's say it's long division. That thing that you want your students to do is built up of different parts called components. So now if you've heard of component composite analysis, they're kind of getting into the weeds on that right now, which is very exciting. I love talking about it. But components are any skill that's immediately needed to complete a given task. So those components for long division, say, could be 0 through 9s, or solving math facts, or reading numbers. They could get, if long division isn't what your end goal is, but it's something else, then solving long division problems could be a component skill. And it could start as something as basic as writing numbers and go all the way up to writing thesis statements. And it can get even more complicated or even more basic. But components just need to be observable and countable. So what is it that your students actually doing? What are the skills that they need to successfully engage in the task that you want?
And that long division example is so good because so many fourth grade teachers, that was me, start to introduce long division, and they can't explain why is it that 5 out of their 30 students uh, struggle with that one topic through the entire year. And what happens usually is it's like a 4 week period of teaching long division. 5 students still don't get it by the end, and the teacher just kind of has to move on, like just sort of gives up. Maybe we'll do a small group and we'll keep on trying to hammer it. But long division is composed of all the components. In fact, subtraction is in there, and addition is there, and division and multiplication, single numbers is in there. So what if we thought about that long division performance as comprised of all of these smaller pieces, and we taught those to fluency in earlier years or during that year leading up to that long division one, and we timed each of those and we got them to be at a very fluent performance. By the time they get into division, those 5 kids that are just basically left to fall off the bus would have all of those fluent, so that we could talk to them about what's going on maybe behind the scenes in that problem, but they would be able to maneuver those numbers fast enough. So I think it's critical to get this part right is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you definitely summed it up perfectly. That's more instruction on a particular subject. So, like long division, if your students are struggling with long division, more instruction on long division isn't necessarily going to fix the problem if the problem is, you know, one of those component skills. And so, yeah, building those up to fluency is critical for success in the future. So that's the beautiful thing about precision teaching is I know we're kind of getting away from the chart. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the chart specifically. Kind of want to talk more about the idea behind precision teaching and what the whole thing is about. But it can be used for basic and complex skills. So component skills, like I just said, are the skills needed for the immediate task. So long division, everything that I need right now to do long division, that's a component skill. A tool skill is so a tool skill is a building block for a component skill. So components are what I need right now. Tool skills are all the things that make up that component. And then our end goal or our learning objective is called a composite skill. So we get tool skills, component skills, and composite skills kind of on this continuum of increasing complexity. So the composite skill, like I said, my example, long division, can be broken down into as many components or tool skills as needed. And the paradigm of what is a tool skill or a component skill for each group can kind of shift. So, like for one group of learners, they might be so fluent with number writing that it's a skill that's readily available for use and wouldn't be considered a component. It would be a tool skill. For another group, number writing might be something that's painful for them, or it's not something that they're very fluent with, or it's not even being performed accurately. So that skill needs to be broken down even further to maybe like pencil grip or wrist strengthening. So it's kind of like this shiftable paradigm of skills that need to be broken down. We can break skills down as far as we need to. And once a tool skill is built up, or once a component skill is built up towards fluency, then it becomes a tool skill. It's like, all right, this thing that I was working on, I've got it. It's easy. I can use it for something else now. And then even the composite skill, so the most complex skill, can become a tool skill. Like, all right, sweet. I've been spending all this time on long division. I'm really good at it. Now I can use long division and apply it to a new skill like algebra. Um, and you can kind of see that it shifts.
And so
Okay, so
here's a
go
question
ahead.
from the chat just about that. Do you have success in early literacy with this approach, like K2, phonemic awareness, letter sounds, CVC words, sight words, etc.?
Yes, two thumbs up. Um, in my reading class this year in particular, we do frequency building on. So we do frequency building on sight words. We also do frequency building on nonsense words, or like you said, CVC words. We do instruction on them first to accuracy, and then frequency building, because it kind of makes sense. The more fluent I am with sight words and nonsense words and CVC words, the better my reading ability will get. But it makes sense logically, but when you look at it like this, it's like, oh yeah, okay, because those skills are tools and components of passage reading, building up tools and components to fluency will lead to a higher performance at the composite level. So yes.
What about spelling?
Um that's an interesting one. So spelling, I think that you could. I don't necessarily have a readily available program to teach spelling, but there's no reason why you couldn't do frequency building with spelling. I just don't know how you would do it. But you could frequency build with any skill. So if you have a program that teaches spelling to a certain level of accuracy that you like, you could use that program, take basically like problems out of it, uh, and then run a timing on it. So like see how many words you can spell correctly in a minute. Uh, and yeah, there's no reason you couldn't do frequency building with that program. But I don't have a program that teaches spelling
I
in
love
a
this
way that I would like.
example. I love this with instruction to accuracy being key. We're not just asking people to start timing random stuff, right? Like this is
Yeah,
there's something that goes on before. There's a phase before where you need to get it in there, right? You need to actually put it in there at first. So that's an important point. Thank you, Mark. I'm looking at
yeah.
447, so I just want to make sure we get through it. So
Oh,
we're doing
geez.
great. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, basically what we get here is this nonlinear analysis of instruction. So the problem that we're looking at, so long division, isn't necessarily the problem to solve. So more instruction on long division isn't going to increase accuracy or fluency with long division, or it might not necessarily increase accuracy or fluency. Here we go. So once we've identified those components, we can analyze student performance on the components. So like, okay, my composite skill is long division. I know what all my component skills are. I'm going to see how accurate, or I'm going to analyze the current level of performance of my students on those components. And once you do that, student performance of each component is going to meet one of these diagnoses with each with its own prescription. So this kind of touches on what you were just saying, Zach. So if students are missing component skills, then they need explicit instruction on those missing components. Because you can't build frequency on a behavior that doesn't exist. So if you're like, all right, you don't know your math facts, I'm not going to have you, practice your math facts. I need to teach them to you first. If the components are present, but the performance is inaccurate, and when I say inaccurate, really I mean 100, less than 100%, but we'll say less than 90%. Explicit instruction on those components is needed. So what we're left with is if students are accurate, like I said, 90% or higher, but they perform slowly, that's where practice to fluency with precision teaching comes in. So accuracy is a necessity for precision teaching. If they're not accurate on the behavior, they can't practice it. So I really want to hammer that point home. They must be accurate before you start engaging in any kind of frequency building. Otherwise, you're just going to increase the frequency of inaccurate behavior or guessing or something that you don't want. They need to be able to do it, and they need to be able to do it every single time you ask before you can start practicing. Okay, so let's do a little mini component composite analysis of long division. So if my composite skill is long division, some possible components for that could be estimation. I would need vocabulary to do long division. I need to know what the dividend, the quotient, and the divisor is. I need to know the algorithm for long division, the steps I need. Some tool skills for that could be number writing. I could even break it down further to marks on a page, number reading, math facts, place value. So you kind of see this hierarchy of skills needed. And you could probably already think that at each of those levels, your group of learners might not even be ready for that as a component skill. So, like estimation, that might be something that you need to break down into its component and tool skills for your learners and then practice those to fluency before you can use estimation as a component for long division. So, any one of those skills might need instruction or frequency building. But the key here is that by building each of those components to fluency, students are going to more predictably engage in the composite skill of long division when prompted. So like Zach was saying earlier, I've taken all of these components of this skill that I want. I've built each of the components first to accuracy, then to fluency, or as close to fluency as I can get. Then in the future, when I say, all right, do this long division problem, students are going to be able to take all of those skills and apply them to solving that long division problem. All right, so kind of just to sum up what I've said, if we identify component skills vital to success on the learning objectives that we have for our students, and we can accurately measure student performance on those objectives, we can confidently determine, or at least more confidently determine, whether or not our instruction is having an impact. But back to our PT action plan. Now that we've defined a goal, identified components, and analyzed performance on components, we can start charting the data, which is, yay, data. And no, you don't have to use the standard celeration chart, but you should. But you should begin charting it somehow. by charting the data taken directly from your student behavior counts. Remember, we're talking about frequency here. So how many times they do something in a specified amount of time. By doing that, we can get a visual representation of learning itself. Remember, learning is change in behavior. So if we can count those behaviors, we can see if learning is happening. This is different than a grade, which may or may not be a product of learning. So back to that kind of accuracy versus frequency example. If I have a grade that's just kind of this end product, which may or may not be product of learning, I don't know. But behavior counts per minute are literally, a picture of learning itself. So once we have some of that performance data, we can decide if our instruction is helping, hurting, or doing nothing, which, ouch, doing nothing, that kind of stinks. But most importantly, every decision that you make can now be based on data taken directly from your learners. So it doesn't get more differentiated than that because I'm taking data directly from each individual student. All right. And now that you've charted the data and you've done that for a couple of days, you can adjust your instructions. So you can see on this chart, well, actually, I'll come back to that. You can adjust instruction because each dot on the chart represents actual student performance data. You can either determine if their performance is improving, declining, or just staying the same. And on the chart, improving looks hard to do on a camera. Improving will go up, stagnating is just a flat line, and declining is down. So it's very easy to see on the chart what it looks like. And if it's declining or stagnating, that's a clue to you that you need to change something. You can also evaluate the effectiveness of any changes in your instruction you make. So say something's not changing, something's getting worse. I go in there, I say, all right, instead of teaching it this way, I'm going to try to teach it this way. I'm going to put a phase change line on my chart to show that I changed something. Then if the data doesn't look any different after that, my change was not effective and I need to do something else. And most importantly, I can give an objective description of a student's performance on any given subject based on those research-backed aims. So I don't have to guess or subjectively measure how a student is doing in any given subject. I can say, well, here's the chart, look at it. Here's how many times they solved long division problems correctly today. Or here's how many CVC words they read today. Here's how many errors they made. I can have an objective measure of their performance data. All right, and now rinse and repeat. You just do it again and again and again. Phase change lines would be challenging for me as a teacher. Understandable. As you can see on this chart, I have a lot of changes. It's a kind of a messy chart, but I picked a messier one so you could get an idea that it doesn't always have to look pretty. But on the bottom there, there's some phase change lines, and then there's a lot of writing. The same chart as before, but it's kind of just blown up. So all you really need to know is that the dots are correct words read in a minute, the X's are incorrect words, and the numbers at the top represent, I call them slices, but they could also be called lessons. So basically, the more distance there are between those lines, it means the longer a student was on a lesson. So you can see at the start on the left of this chart, there's lots of space in between lessons. So this student was not progressing through this particular program very quickly. So I tried an intervention. I think that first one I tried was basically I just told him to slow down because he was going too quickly, making too many errors. I was like, you got to slow down. Not a very, specific intervention, but I changed something. I said, slow down. Didn't really work. Didn't pass off slices very frequently. And then I tried a few different things. And as you move down the chart to the right, you can see that towards the end, those lesson phase change lines started getting closer and closer together, which means that what I was doing started working. So I stuck with that intervention. And basically what it ended up with is I would click a little clicker every time he read a word correctly. And then he started passing off lessons very fast, like multiple lessons in a week. So I get this visual picture of how fast learning is happening. All right. So this all sounds fine and dandy for my classroom of 8 children. How do you do this with a classroom of more than 8 children? How do you do it with 20 kids or 30 kids? Well, primarily what you should do is teach the kids to chart. Like we were talking about earlier, they really can do it. This is an actual picture of a chart from one of my students in my class. And I would say that there's even some stuff missing on this chart, but like this is pretty good. This is a student who is new to our school, just learned how to chart this year. They have all the information that you need. And this is data that they've done with a partner. So like they've done a timing. Once again, this is word reading fluency. Most of my pictures are from my class, my reading class. This is data that they did with their partner. So like, all right, we did a timing together. I'm going to chart it. And each one of those little boxes is 1 day. So basically what we do at Morningside is we start with group timings. It's something like word reading fluency. It's a little bit tricky, but number writing or math facts is easier. You can do it as a whole group. So like, all right, everybody, get your paper out, get your material ready. We're going to do a timing. Here we go. Please begin. Everybody starts. Everybody's all together. After the timing, you can say, all right, stop. Now we're going to check each other's work. Everybody switch papers. You can set, an explicit routine and teach it. So whatever you want your routine to be. But what I do is I say, all right, 2 minutes to switch papers, check your partner's work, and chart it. And then after that 2 minutes, I go around and I make sure every single person has charted on their chart correctly. If you don't want to use this chart, you could just have them write their score down like on a piece of paper or on the actual material that they have. Or if you want to make your own kind of record sheet just for them to record it so they have it or you have it, whatever works, as long as you're getting the data from their actual performance. And then students are taught to engage in peer coaching. So hypothetically, they should be able to discriminate or tell the difference between a correct response and an error. So, hey, you didn't read that word correctly. What's this word again? And they say, all right, we'll count that one as an error. So on that timing, you had 50 correct words and 2 incorrect words. And that way, each student can act as a teacher or coach for their partner. So you don't have to do this kind of one-on-one with each student every single day. You can have faith that the routines for peer coaching that you've taught to your kids will kind of take care of it, and they can be each other's coach. So I have a video of this from a classroom in Iceland that's a larger, closer to tier 1 classroom with kids doing this kind of thing. So here, I mean, you can see everybody is doing something. Those red folders that they have, those are like the actual fluency slices that they're working out of. All right, so we kind of get the idea here. All right, so now I want to hit with the kind of discussion. I know I did a lot of talking, and I know we're kind of right at the end of the time, so sorry about that. But what I want to leave you with is kind of based on what you've gathered so far, thinking about what you're doing in your classroom right now, how could you implement frequency building in your class with the current materials that you have without even thinking about getting anything new? It's what you have right now. How could you do that? Um, yeah. And then, maybe specifically, if you were to take anything out of here, define one end behavior that you want from your learners. Start thinking about potential components for that end behavior and give an estimate of like, what do I think their current performance is on those components? And then think about what supports you might need to start implementing precision teaching in your classroom or your whole school or your district. Like, you're probably going to need some kind of support. What would it be? What would you need from admin? What would you need from your fellow teachers? What would you need from your students? Those are kind of the important things to start thinking about. All right. I've got one more slide. This is a little plug for MSI, so the Morningside Summer Institute. You should definitely all come out. Maybe you can see my classroom. But you can learn all about the Morningside model, a lot more about precision teaching than you can in this short little presentation. But yeah, so there's that information. Thank you
Daniel,
very much, everybody.
amazing job. I love it. So yeah, folks, I have heard great things. I've never attended about this Morningside Academy Summer Institute. And basically people that have in my network have gone there have learned about things like talk aloud problem solving, which is like a super cool method. They learn about direct instruction. They learn about all of these different, it's kind of like if you're looking for a training program over the summer that to really kind of boost your knowledge of what we just talked about and more. A different form of education that is like education is just kind of upside down, where we're giving kids lots of big problems to solve and we're not teaching the components to fluency. And this is like the training to do. So I thank you for that. And Daniel, you did a great job. I just want to reinforce
Thanks.
everything you did there. And everybody else here, thank you so much for coming on the call. I really enjoy doing these type of presentations. If you need anything from us, Daniel's giving you his email, and the recording will come out to you soon as well. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
That's sweet. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. I really appreciate you coming. So nice to see all the thank yous. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just keep coming.
Perfect. Hey, good job on that. Um, hey, we'll be in touch. Just loving, I loved what you just did there. We'll be in touch about the, let me stop the